Excellent. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Detroit MySec for August. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. I know you all can't see it. It's a packed room in here. Thousands of people. It's astounding. So tonight, we actually have a crossover because the Southfield chapter director is here talking to us about BashBunny. So Brett will be taking that away in just a second. So I just want to give a quick shout out to all the different things that are going on here in Detroit, especially for anybody who's new to the area. So MySec is one of many InfoSec organizations that are going on here in the revitalization of tech in Detroit. So we have ISC Squared, and we're actually represented by them tonight, which is exciting. Thanks for coming out. DEFCON 313 is another group. Infinite, you can find him on Twitter and Slack. He often joins us as well, but their meetup, they do every other week on Wednesdays, so it actually overlaps tonight. They're more red team focused, so they do a lot of hacking stuff there. And then OWASP Detroit is also getting their start here. So another organization there. And in October, we should actually be having a talk from them. So MySec's whole thing is bringing the community together. So definitely check out those organizations. With a relatively small crowd, like typically we would ask of, who's looking for jobs, who has jobs, but having talked with everybody here, I know that that's not really a thing. So without further ado, I'm actually going to hand it off to Brett. Take it away, good sir. I don't know how these things work.
Thank you, sir. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for coming out tonight. So hope you all bear with me as I go through my presentation today. So I had a lot of fun working on this project. I've been working on it for about a month, but really heavily for the past 2 weeks, and try to come up with a fun name for some of us that have been around for the 11 o'clock Looney Tunes on Saturday mornings. So we got Yosemite Sam has Hasenpfeffer for dinner. So this talk is going to go over introduction to the Bash Bunny. I'm going to do some demonstrations as long as they are successful, and then we're actually going to review what Hasenpfeffer really is. So some topics, I'm going to go over a little bit about me, the Bunny basics. I drew a little cheesy attack platform diagram that I hope everyone appreciates. We're actually going to connect to the Bash Bunny. We're going to take a look at the file structure. We're going to do some payloads and understand the Ducky script as well as the Bunny script as well. So a little bit about me. I graduated with a Bachelor of Science from Lawrence Technological University, and then from Walsh College I got my Master's of Science in Information. I am a husband and father. You can see my family there. They're the reason why I don't play around with tools like these more often, because over the past few weeks they have missed me. So when you geek out, you really get in the mode, and the next thing you know, it's 11 o'clock at night, kids are already in bed, and you're wondering what happened with the entire evening. So. From the wife, I see. Because they're beautiful. Yes. I am also the MySec Southfield director, as previously shared, and a member of InfraGard, MySec, and all that kind of fun stuff. All right, so first thing I want everyone to know is I know nothing. I do not consider myself an expert on anything. I am more of a jack of all trades. And master of none. So the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. So please know that as I'm going through this, I don't claim to be an expert, but I will share the knowledge that I have learned and hopefully answer any questions anybody may have. So just making sure that this is shared given our location and it's in Detroit, that these are my thoughts. Opinions expressed are solely my own and do not express the views of opinions of my employer. All right, Bash Bunny. This is the Bash Bunny. Looks like a USB device because it is a USB device. But inside this USB device, it is a quad-core 1.6 gigahertz ARM processor. Processor is rated to 125 degrees Celsius. Inside of this case, there is a thermal glue that attaches everything together to help it dissipate all the heat. So when you plug this in, you're thinking, okay, this is a USB device, which is true, but it is also a very powerful computer. Comes with 512 megs of RAM, 8 gigabyte basically USB disk, and as you can see the measurements down there, it's very tiny. It runs a full Linux distribution, Debian. Booting the device takes less than 7 seconds. If you watch any of the Hak5 videos, they repeat that so many times. It's actually amazing. But it's kind of cool to watch that you think about how long it takes for a computer to boot, even a Raspberry Pi. 7 seconds is fairly fast. It also has a virtual 2 gigabit Ethernet card. And we'll go over that in a little bit, yes, in this. USB 2.0 mass storage, a keyboard, which is a human interface device, and a serial port, all combined in this nice little device. So, where's my Hasenpfeffer? All right, so here's my little attack platform diagram to better help people understand. I shared this with a coworker today because we were discussing that this was a computer, and he understood it, but it wasn't quite clicking. So I showed him the slide, and he's like, you know what, this actually helped out, so I'm glad I created this. So as I just stated, the USB Bash Bunny plugs into your computer, and to the left there, you can see a keyboard, a USB device, a network card, and a Linux computer. So yes, by plugging this device into any computer, you get all of those devices available. Now with a keyboard, you can do keyboard injection. It's just like plugging a keyboard into the computer and typing away. The USB storage is exactly what you think it is. So if you had a USB in your bag right now, you plugged it into the computer, you can emulate a USB drive. But this is where it gets kind of cool. You can also emulate a network card. So you can spin up a network card, and it uses 2 different types of network cards, one that's mainly compatible with Linux and another one that's for Windows. And we'll go over that in a second. And then direct shell access. So with a Linux computer running with a network card attached to your computer, and a keyboard attached to the computer, not only can you connect directly to your system, you can have your system connect back to your computer. So yes, this isn't a magical tool that you can just plug in or have, you have to have physical access to the computer or some way to get physical access. And of course, there's a serial port as well. So the resources I used to put this talk together are right on this slide. There's the wiki, which about 99% of everything I needed came from the wiki. The other portion came from the forums, reading what other issues people had. I didn't post anything, but in the past I have, and the people in the community are fantastic. And they also have, since the last time I've been playing around with a lot of Hak5 products, a Discord server, which I also connected to, and I'll show you in a second, as I ran into some issues, which I'll go over. And then, of course, the GitHub. GitHub has a ton of payloads that the community have put together. It's a really good starting point. For any advanced penetration testing, this would be a good place to start, but I'm assuming you'd want to write your own stuff targeted for whatever company that you're looking at. All right, so connecting to the Bash Bunny is pretty straightforward. When I first connected the device, it came up as a COM3. And when I connect, there are 3 different modes, so I put it into Army mode, which allows me to go ahead and deploy the payloads into the system. Serial connection is very basic, you can see right there. And then there's the default credentials. Login is root, the password is Hak5 Bunny. The default IP address for the network card is 172.16.64.1, and the DHCP range that it assigns to devices is between 10 and 12. Any questions so far? Pretty straightforward. All right.
Real quick, you said you put it into Army mode. What does that mean?
So I'll go into that in 1 second. So what else? The other thing you also get in the Army mode is the USB disk. So you can see here there's a folder for payloads, and then there's also the Bunny updater. And I want to bring focus to that because that was one of the first things I did. So I don't know about you guys, but I have a whole shelf of projects that I bought, started, and never finished. So I bought the Bash Bunny when they first announced it. I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever. I'm going to buy this now. I'm going to play with it. Once I got it, brought it home, plugged it in, played with it for maybe a day, and it's from 2017. It literally sat on my shelf until I picked it up about a month ago. So I'm sure that happens to nobody else out there. Along with a land turtle that my wife bought me about 2 years ago that I still need to play with. So the first thing I did was update the Bash Bunny. So real quick though, before we go through, we'll go through this. So updating is pretty straightforward. All these words on the screen basically say if you want to update the Bash Bunny, you go to the downloads directory. There is a gzip file with the latest firmware. You take that firmware, you download it, you validate the hash to make sure it's not corrupted. You throw that into the root file system of the Bash Bunny. You put it in Army mode, and you plug it in. Pretty straightforward, okay? But there's an easier tool, the Bunny updater that I brought focus to on the previous slide. So they developed a tool that does all that for you. It's pretty cool. It reaches out to the internet. It downloads the gzip file, the latest firmware. First, it checks to see what version you have. If there is a newer version out there, it grabs it, downloads it, and it throws it onto your BashBunny. It also syncs up everything that's on their GitHub page. So all the payloads, the extensions, the documents, it throws everything onto your BashBunny. So if you're trying to learn, it basically throws all the resources right on here so you don't have to go hunt for them. I thought that was really cool. All right. So what I have here is a video of me updating the BashBunny. I accelerated it by about 20%, and it's going through everything I just described. But I ran into some challenges when I first ran this. So if you take a look at the screen, it says that it's checking for Bunny updates, and it's already up to date. That's because I had to run this a few times because my computer came back with a couple warnings. But then it also found the new firmware, downloaded it, and threw it on the BashBunny. So here's the warnings. So as soon as I ran the Bunny updater, it reached out to the internet and started downloading stuff to the USB drive. My anti-malware AV, which is just Defender on here. This is my lab laptop. I don't connect this to my home network except for a dedicated router that isn't connected to everything else. I detonate malware on here. I keep this locked down. I don't even share USB drives back and forth with this. So I had AV on here. I had the firewall turned on. I didn't have any network sharing turned on. And all of those actually caused me some issues because if your computer shut down like that, some of the things that are normally open on a work laptop that the Bunny leverages weren't available. But the first one is obviously, you can see on there, it's Mimikatz. So it's PowerShell for Mimikatz. So using the Bunny updater is great if you're learning, but if you're actually going to be using this tool as a pen test device, I would definitely recommend being very careful what you put on here because it's a USB drive that as soon as you plug in, any system should start scanning an alert on what's on there, which would obviously tip your hand. There's also a git browse data PowerShell script that it flagged on, and another one that I'm not familiar with, which is just a shell. Okay? So learning that, there's a couple things that if I was a pen tester or a red teamer, which I'm not, that I definitely learned is that I should have took a left at Albuquerque. Don't keep those files on the BashBunny if you're going to plug it into a real engagement. All right. So as I highlighted there, the tar file, it's a gzip archive there, but it's a tar file that I was just describing. Threw that into the root directory. Then you unplug it, and then you plug it right back in. The operating system will go ahead and look and find this file, and it will start updating the BashBunny. So this is where I got a little bit stressed. So the first time, not touching the BashBunny for several years, I used the Bunny updater, updated everything, and it was the original version. I think it was 1.0, so it was just a red blinky light, which seemed to be forever. Now it does say that it takes up to 10 minutes. I think it took almost 15, and I don't know what that urge is when you wait there, and you even know not to unplug it, you get that urge I got to reset it. I need to do something to fix it. I don't know where that comes from. I wonder if it happens to anybody else. So I just kind of walked away, came back. It was at the green light, ready for arming. If everything was detected, I wasn't stressed out anymore. All right, so file structure. So real quick, high level, and then we're going to go take a look at the BashBunny. We're going to do some connect to it real quick and just kind of like explore it as if it was a new device to you guys. So after I ran the Bunny updater, the entire directory changed. So earlier I pointed out the file structure which only had a payloads directory. And the bottom right there is the new file structure that's on my BashBunny. So there is a docs, a language, loots, payloads, and tools. And we'll go look at what those are, but they're fairly self-explanatory. The docs is what I was describing. It's all the documentation. So if you don't have an internet connection or you want to keep it local, everything's there on the BashBunny. Loot, that's where all the good stuff goes. So they use that a lot in their videos and all of their payloads. Anything that it grabs, it just throws into the loots directory. And then payloads is exactly what you think it is. That's where all of the payloads go. And there's a switch 1 and switch 2 position. And depending on the switch position in BashBunny is what payload it will execute. And then there's a payloads library. And that's where I was describing earlier. That's where my AV totally flared up on. Because it was downloading all of those payloads that other people have written. So currently, I don't have anything in the libraries directory. I removed all of them, but that's where all those would go. All right, so let's take a quick look. All right, so first things first. So you can see here, there's no USB drive plugged in at the time. I'm making sure the BashBunny is in Army mode. And I don't know if you can see out there, but it flashes a green light at first, and then it boots, and then it sits there. I think it's a flashing blue light when it's ready, and you'll be able to see on the screen And I turned up the volume so you guys can hear whenever it detects a new USB device. So here's the Bash Bunny. There's the file structure that we were just looking at earlier. Documents, I wiped everything because I was having issues I was describing earlier, and so it's just a base install right now. Languages, oh, again, I removed those. Actually, let's go up here real quick, as I think. No. All right. Loot directory, there will be some stuff in loot because I was doing some testing earlier. We'll look at that in a second. Payloads, switch 1 and switch 2. And there's also a config file. So we'll look at that in 1 second. So now, but the good thing is you guys want to believe that this is actually a computer, right? So I'm currently not connected. It's going to show up as a COM3 device. So you can see right here, COM3. All my settings are to the default. And here we go. We got a root login. Hak5 Bunny. I'm sure you guys are wondering why I kept the default password. My thought process was I didn't want to change it to something I might forget. And really, this isn't on the internet. This is just making a connection between this computer and this connection. So you'd have to be on this computer, which I am currently on, attacking this device with its default password. So I'm not concerned about all of that.
And you said at home you were on a segmented section of your network.
Yes. Yeah. So it's a full Linux operating system. So you have an etc directory, you have a bin directory, the root directory because this is a root user. So under root there is the udisk, which you can see is a directory. That udisk is the USB drive. So right now, if I change to it, there should be nothing there, right? But if I udisk mount and then change directory to udisk, there's all those files that we were just looking at. Payloads, loot, docs, all right? There's a umount. Oh, because I'm in it. No biggie. Okay. Any questions so far? Oh, it's going to do this every time. All right, switch position. Brian, you're asking about the switch position. So it's pretty straightforward. The position closest to the USB is the Army mode. And then the one in the middle is switch 2, and then the one all the way back is switch 3. And what that does is those directories under the payloads basically points to those different directories when you go to launch. All right, so Bunny script. How do you get the Bash Bunny to do what it needs to do? So we learned it's a computer, Linux operating system. You can emulate a network card. You can emulate a USB storage. You can emulate a keyboard and a COM port. So how do you get the Bash Bunny to work? So does anybody know why they call it the Bash Bunny? All the payloads are in Bash. It's literally just running Linux commands on the back end side. So you have attack mode, which specifies the device that you want to emulate. We're definitely going to go into the payloads, look at that. You have the LED command, which changes the color of the LED so you can get some immediate visual feedback of what's going on with your payloads. There's the quack command. If anybody's used the rubber ducky before, which I have, and I had a lot of fun at my previous job, basically rickrolling people. I had a long USB cable. I'd plug it in, set it on their desk, and then the computer, and I had like a 15-minute delay, so I would log in, and every 10 minutes it would launch YouTube with a rickroll. And I remember one person who really thought, you hacked my computer. It was fun. I was like, no, it's just a keyboard, I promise. But the Bash Bunny supports everything that the rubber ducky has done. And they have their language, the ducky language, they have a command here called quack. And you can do any of the commands that you've done on the rubber ducky on this device as well, and the ducky lang. So ducky lang defaults to US, but what if you're in France? So keyboards get mapped differently. So it was interesting going through the early posts in the forums. There were people that were attempting to use this, and it wasn't working because they were in different countries. So quickly added the language support. So you specify what language keyboard you want to emulate depending on your target. So real quick, I'm going to take another quick break. Plug this back in. And try to make that so you guys can see it, but I'll hold it up as well. Yeah, okay. So let's reconnect. we go. Hak5 Bunny. All right. So I mentioned this is a full-fledged Linux operating system. There is a user local, and there's a directory right there called Bunny. All right. So if you go into Bunny, there's some default stuff that's in here that it uses when you want to reset your device. But under the bin directory, you see attack mode, LED, quack, and you can even see the Q is an alias for quack. So those commands that you're executing in the script is nothing more than just commands that are within the Linux operating system, programs that were developed specifically for the BashBunny. So if you keep that in mind, this actually becomes a very simple device. So you have some key commands you need to learn, and then anything you can do in Bash, any service you can spin up on a Linux operating system, all those type of fun things directly connected to the computer you're attacking or your target are available to you. So right now, currently, we have a flashing blue light. Pretty straightforward. If I want to do something cool, I can just do LED and change that LED to red. Green. Pretty cool. So one of the things that I learned, which I'll talk about later, I had to disconnect from the internet. And that was because I was doing some testing of the payloads, which I've done at home, I've done everywhere else, but they weren't working here. And I thought that was weird. And what I accidentally did is I plugged in the BashBunny at one point, and instead of going in Army mode, and I clicked on SSH by mistake, and it says, you have a new SSH key. Do you accept it? And I was like, oh. So the Wi-Fi network was on the same network as the BashBunny, or at least IP range. So my computer defaulted to the default route. I was like, okay, let me disconnect from Wi-Fi. That way everything will work. So that was one thing I quickly learned here is an Achilles heel. If your computer is connected to the exact same network that the BashBunny is using, it's rendered useless at that point because you're spinning up a network card that's going to be conflicting with a network that it's already seeing on the network. And so some reconnaissance might be important if you're truly a pen tester and you want to use this at specific targets, is to find out what kind of network ranges that they use on their network.
So if you did so it won't work on any internal 172 network?
Well, the Class C network that this is currently running on. So depending on, if it's a Class A or, what actually I think it's Class B for the 172 network, whatever size that is, if that's completely available and they're using that, then yeah, you couldn't use any IPs in that range.
So as like a best practice, would you set it up for like a classless subnet with like a /30 or something like that to try and avoid that?
It's a good idea. I didn't think it through that far.
Doesn't matter, Hansen, you don't have. That's good to know though.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was going to also ask you, this device is for, you have to, like you said, you have to have physical access to whatever machine, whatever you're trying to do it on.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way that you can hide, because when you obviously plug in here for the demo, it shows, hey, BashBunny,
Yes.
it comes up. But I'm assuming there's a way to hide that.
There is. I'll go towards the end. I actually haven't tested it. So there are systems out there that can detect, hey, this is a known type of device. So there are ways to detect it, but there are ways to get around it as well. All right. So real quick, so I was just playing around with the LED lights. So here, they've already developed a lot of different things to make this easy. So I did red, I think I did green, you've already seen them blue. You can also do patterns. So you can say a solid red. You can say a double red, quin red, all those type of things. So you can change the LED state to a lot of different states, which is really, really cool. But in the README for the firmware that came out, they actually took it to the next step, and they created these states. So the blinking and the colors, all that kind of good stuff, I don't want to mess around with that if I'm developing payloads. They came up with a standard LED signaling for attacks. So you have a setup phase. You have any type of fails that you have. You have attack stage. You can have a stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. And basically, it lets you know, flashes yellow light, single, double, triple, so you know what stage it's on. And then there's the special ones you can play with. And then when it finishes, it will very fast blink green and then turn solid green, so you know that the payload's done, which has made things very easy. So when doing a payload and I'm having issues, I can quickly tell, hey, it just finished, because everyone's following these same standards. So I think Hak5 did a really great job standardizing their payloads, the processes, the LED lights, so you're very familiar, not guessing with, oh, what color did I change that to for stage 5? If you just follow their standard, it actually makes it very easy.
Once you learn.
Right.
And that's beneficial in case you're going to plug it into a machine where like you're not logged in, so you can't actually see any of the process that it's making. All you have is the LED light to
Yes.
tell you where you're at.
And we actually, every 3 payloads, the last 3 payloads are exactly that way.
Okay.
All right. Every time I do this, it tries to go to split screen. All right. Any questions so far? All right, extensions. So extensions enhance those basic commands that I was just sharing, the bash commands. So there's the run command, and I'm going to do a demo, and I'm going to demonstrate a way that you can launch the Windows command prompt and then type in a command and load an application. That's what I'm familiar doing from the rubber ducky. But the Hak5 team realized, hey, this is something that everyone does, and it's different depending on the operating system that you're on. So they came up with a run command. So depending on the operating system, you can specify if your target's a Windows system, you can do run win notepad. So then it does a control R or a Windows R, loads it up, and actually then loads that application you're trying to run. If it's OS X, it does it in a terminal, and then you also have Xterm as well. So I don't have anything but a Windows system that I've tested on, so I haven't tested those other ones. Extensions continued. There is the get command, which exports the system variables. So we mentioned the switch position. What if I wanted to write a new payload in the second switch position based on data or information I gathered in switch 1? You could almost have an infinite switching back and forth of advanced attacks that basically build on themselves by using these extensions. Or what is the target host computer? I want to know the host name. What is the IP that was assigned when DHCP assigned my this computer its IP? All right. So extensions are pretty cool. Let's go take a look at them real quick.
Real quick, Brett, you mentioned
Yes, sir.
that you could have this infinite loop between switches, but when you were originally describing switches, I was under the impression that you had to physically set the switch on the BashBunny. Can you also programmatically set the switch, or you just specify in my payloads folder, go to the switch 2 folder?
You would specify where it's at. My point was is that you'd still have to switch it back and forth, but let's just say your first attack was, hey, I want to find out what ports are open. So you do an nmap, you plug it in, you kind of do an nmap, and we'll do one of those. And then based on that data, maybe it rewrites, basically a polymorphic attack that then changes the attack on for phase 2 based on that information. You switch it to the next position, it has some IP addresses, some ports, and it starts gathering. It says, well, RDP's open, let me try a different type of attack, and then it switches back, and maybe it's going to do a brute force. So that was just you could have an endless, you would have to manually switch back and forth, yes. And then there's 2 more tools we're going to take a look at, which is required tool and the ducky lang. The required tool is an example you see right there is InPacket. It just checks to make sure that you have the software installed. So let's go take a look at this. And it's really easy to figure the system out just by playing around. So back to here, we have payloads and extensions. Those are the extensions I was just talking about. So anything that's in the extensions folder gets launched when the computer boots. So you want to write your own extension to enhance anything that the BashBunny is doing, you can just throw it right in here and automatically executes it. You can also, in the root directory, there is a config.txt. And you can set defaults in here. So so the payloads that get launched are based on the switch position. This is a payload that gets launched every single time. So right now it just sets the ducky language. But one of the things I was doing when I was playing around with this is I was enabling Cucumber. Cucumber, you might ask, what is it? What's Cucumber? So Cucumber is a way to keep your BashBunny cool. So they realized when you plugged it in, this quad-core computer sitting here for an hour starts to generate a lot of heat. And some people were complaining about that. So those quad cores are just running full speed, doing what they need to do. But if you're just doing a basic attack or you're sitting there and you're doing some debugging or developing payloads, you don't need those other cores. So they actually, by doing Cucumber enable, it disables those 3 other cores and just leaves 1 core, and it makes it a lot cooler. So how do they do that, you might ask? Let's go take a look. So the first one was, let's do the get that we were just looking at. It's just bash. So if you say get target IP, it just looks at the DHCP leases and comes back to what lease was assigned. So when the BashBunny boots up and you load up the network card, it also loads a DHCP server and assigns your computer an IP. And that's how it's able to track everything. You want to know the host name, same thing. It gets it from the leases. The IP of the actual BashBunny itself, which is default to .1, but just in case you assigned it to be something different, it just looks up that information. And it also has their code here for getting switch position 1, 2, or 3. Any questions?
Is this particular script one you wrote, or this looks like a default?
This is all part of the default. So this is part of the extension, default extensions I was just showing you. So when you say get target IP, this is what it's running.
Doesn't the existence of a switch position environment variable indicate that you could programmatically change that environment variable to overwrite where you're at?
Yes, you could, actually. You're right. It's Linux. It's just a file system.
Yeah.
You can specify.
So you want to
Good point.
manually switch, you could start fire
Back and forth.
Yeah.
Ah, I wonder how.
That makes sense, because if you were to like plug it into something and you need to switch,
Right.
you're like, hey, don't look at what I'm doing.
Right.
Mhm.
Like you're gonna walk in, plug it in on like a server somewhere or whatever, and then just walk away. Go somewhere else. Yeah.
Don't look over here. Don't worry about this.
So let's.
Don't worry, cucumber will kick in a second.
All right. Cucumber. I want to show you my cucumber. So you can see here the enable. The first line, I'm not quite sure what that does, but it's the same for all of these. So I think it's just saying, hey, just set it to whatever normal governance that you have for its speed. But you can definitely see what's happening here. 0 is usually disabled in the Linux world and programming world. So it's taking the 1 through 3rd core and it's disabling them. Still leaving core 0, which is your very first one. And then when you disable Cucumber, it re-enables those cores. Or right here, sorry. Re-enables those cores. And then they also have a super performance mode, which I guess it gets really, really hot. But if you have a need to really put it in overdrive, they don't recommend doing this for very long. You can put all the cores into performance mode.
Ultra fast scan.
So, will it explode?
I haven't done it, and I didn't want to potentially burn the $100, and I was trying to be very careful in preparing for this because I didn't want to have any issues. So on that note, I didn't share this at the beginning because I was able to resolve them, but last night was a fun night. I've been working on this for a while. I only had a couple slides left that I wanted to tweak and review, and then I'm like, you know what, I'm going to go through all my payloads, and they all started to fail. And so literally the stress, right? It's 6 p.m. at night, and I'm like, okay, I got this. No big deal. There's something simple. I actually wound up reflashing this probably about 10 times. I looked on the forums for every single way to put it to factory reset, to reformat everything or redo everything. I downgraded the firmware. I re-upgraded the firmware. I downgraded it to a different type of firmware, and I kept on getting the same issues. All my ducky commands that we'll go over in a second weren't working. No idea why. Absolutely no idea why. So I was very, very stressed. Had to start doing workarounds and how the payloads were doing. Fortunately, I had some data that I had sitting around for my testing. I'm like, well, at least I'll be able to show this. Got everything to work through. It's like midnight. I haven't even practiced my slides yet or reviewed them. I'm like, okay, that's it. I'm going to go to bed. Today, I was demonstrating it this morning. I was going through all of the payloads to make sure they're working. And then while I was down here set up, started to work again.
You had a prevention virus.
So I was like,
You already have bandits.
Yeah. This is why we pray to the demo gods.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. 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 The demo god came through. Well, we're not there yet. All right.
So with the config, you said that fires every time. So when you switch, when you go between switch 1, switch 2, that config.txt refires?
Correct. Oh, every time. Well, you pull it out and you put it in the position and you put it back in. The computer boots in that arming mode. So arming mode, attack mode 1 or attack mode 2,
Okay.
or the arming mode. So you don't switch it while it's on.
Oh,
I haven't done that. I don't know if that's possible. Not willing to try.
okay.
If someone has one and wants me to know that works, great, by all means. All right, so instead of, all right, so attack mode. I bet you there is a default setting for this I can do, but So different attack modes. So we took a look at the file structure, we took a look at the extensions, we actually took a look at some of the shell script code that gives you the extensions. Now there's the attack mode. So you specify attack mode and what you want to emulate. So you do attack mode serial if you want to emulate a serial card. The RNDIS Ethernet, which was something that was new to me. So RNDIS Ethernet is a built-in Ethernet adapter for all Windows computers. You do not need admin permissions in order to set this up. You simply specify or plug in a device that has this, and the computer will automatically recognize it and then attach to whatever is connected to it. Same thing for Linux, which is the ECM Ethernet as well. And some Linux systems will also recognize the Windows versions of the adapter. So this is what this tool leverages, is that it realizes, hey, I can spin up a network card that almost every Windows system is going to recognize without having admin permissions to add it.
I was gonna say, is that like a, is that like because of like UKMP? Like universal plug and play? Is that why it's like just accepting it, or?
That would be a good guess. I didn't do too much research into why, but Windows needed, whatever reason, they needed to have an adapter that always worked, and this is it.
Yeah, it's just a trust, so it makes it easy for all users. You plug it in, computer supports it, you're good to go. You just plug it in and it's gonna work. No configuration. There, and the guys take advantage of that.
Right, and you also have the human interface device, or HID, which emulates a keyboard or anything else that you could do typing on. A storage device, which is a universal mass storage or a USB device. And you can also set everything to off. You might want to ask, why would you want to set something to off? Well, in some of these scripts, you're going to see a setup procedure where it's creating local directories on the Linux operating system. If you mount the USB drive, you no longer have access to that USB drive because it's mounted somewhere else. So you may want to turn something off in order to do some things to be able to turn it back on so you have access to other aspects of the device. Does that make sense? Fantastic. All right, Ducky script. So as I mentioned, everything that the rubber ducky had available is also available to the Bash Bunny. It's pretty straightforward. You can type quack and then whatever the ducky script command is, so like string hello world. Or if you have a text file, you can do quack, give it the switch position where your payload is, and then also have all of those commands just in a text file. And they also have an alias that we looked at earlier, Q. And then there's a whole list of ducky commands that are available out there, and that is a very important way of actually executing these attacks. So here's the fun part. Wow, okay, payloads. So we're going to go through these 4 or 5 different payloads, and if the demo gods are in my favor, we'll have some fun, and we'll see how some basics of using the Bash Bunny. And I actually really like this image, the Hasenpfeffer recipe. Has everybody picked up the little nuances I've had on the slide? Okay. All right. So we are in Army mode. And you can see here payloads. We have switch 1, switch 2. And then I have my payloads up here. Hello world. And then we can do it here or we can just look at it. I say let's just look at it. So my very, very first payload, actually my first payload I did was testing out was just changing the LED lights, just changing all different, like, oh cool, I changed the lights. And I was like, yay, it works. Then this was kind of my second. I was like, okay, I want to do a hello world. And just to walk through this real quick, it's a bash program like I was mentioning earlier. I started following the standard setup that they recommended on their site. So I changed the LED to setup mode. And I put my attack mode into the human interface device or a keyboard. And then I get the switch position just so I can spit it back out just to verify that it's working. So here is the rubber ducky way of launching an application. So I set the LED to attack mode. This was actually left over from the troubleshooting I was doing last night. This is not necessary, but it's a 500 millisecond delay. Then it launches the Windows key, which is the GUI, and then R. So it's just like hitting Windows R. Here, you do need a delay because it takes a second for that window to pop up. So there's a 200 millisecond. I've seen as low as 500 millisecond just to give it that quick moment for that window to pop up. And then it's going to type in the string notepad, hit enter, and it's going to wait another moment, and it's going to type in hello world, and it's going to spit back out my switch position. Pretty straightforward. Let's give it a try. So I'm going to take that. I'm going to throw that into switch position 1. Yes, I want to overwrite. And yes, always, always, always eject your device. I'm going to unplug. I'm going to move the switch position to position 1. And then because of the issues I had, I'm actually going to open this up in a new tab, because if it starts typing things in Windows and it didn't launch the GUI R, some weird things start happening. Plug it in, flashes green, it's going to boot in 7 seconds. And hopefully be able to hear it when it recognizes the new keyboard device. There it goes. Interesting thing, I've got caps lock on. So it did it in reverse. But pretty cool, no?
Yeah.
All right, so we know it works, which was very happy. This wasn't working 2 hours ago. All right, no, don't save. So now I'm going to take it out, put it back into Army mode, and we're going to go try the next payload. Start small, then go big. So this one here is exactly the same thing, but this time I'm using an extension. So all of the code that you saw on this previous one is now replaced with one Win Notepad. At least that one section, those about 4 or 5 lines to be able to get the application to load. So they realize, hey, you do this all the time. Don't mess around with the delays. We're just going to handle that for you, and you know it's a Windows system. So let's go give this one a try, and we should get exactly the same results. There we go. Eject. And just in case there's issues, blank page. But I have faith. All right, just found the keyboard. There we go, exact same thing. I made sure caps lock was off this time. Seems pretty straightforward, doesn't it? Can actually have a lot of fun. All right, so let's put it back into Army mode. Let's take a look at the next payload. Nmap. This is where I wanted to start having some fun. So, cool thing. What if you wanted to find out what kind of open ports are on a company laptop? You know, you had physical access as we're describing, but you're not quite sure. You don't want to set off an alarm anywhere, throw in a network scan over the wire, but you do have a BashBunny. So you can throw in the payload here, attack mode. All I do is enable the Ethernet adapter. Let me see if I still have it up. Yep, so I have my Ethernet adapters here. We're going to watch it. It's going to tell me I'm going to put it in the setup mode. I'm going to get the target IP. I'm going to get the host name, and I'm just going to do an Nmap.
When you're doing this one, will you hold up the BashBunny so we can see the LED switch?
Absolutely. All right, so Nmap. This is actually, I get a little bit more nervous because it's actually a little bit more than just a hello world. So we're going to replace that, and I'm also going to go to the loot directory, and then I have this quick red save. I'll go into that later. That's the only thing in this directory, right? Awesome. This should work but fail, and you'll see what I mean in a second. So I put our position 1. So it's green, and this goes to, there's nothing on my screen. There's nothing to launch on the system. It's literally just assigning an IP. Oh. And then you can see the Ethernet adapter. And right now it is, and at the same time I'm trying to multitask. So it's scanning, right? So an Ethernet adapter, I connected by COM port last time. Now I'm going to connect by SSH. If I do a PS AUX, grep nmap, there's the nmap that's executing. And it's still yellow, so it's still scanning. So this was a great idea. Find a device that takes 7 minutes to load, or 7 seconds to load. If I do this enough time, that's half the talk. All right, it's green, it's done. Let's go look. Nmap's not running anymore. Pretty cool, huh? Well, let's go check out this payload. right, there we go. Loot. Ooh, desktop. And that's actually my host name. Take a look at it. It worked, but there's no open ports. So I mentioned before I was having some issues getting some of these payloads to work because I have this laptop locked down. So we want to find out what's actually on here. So let's hack naked, so to speak. And that is actually where that term comes from. If anybody didn't know that, it means doing active attacks on a network with no firewall.
I've been doing it very long.
All right. So again, the firewall is off. I didn't even, well, we looked at the, here, let me, just in case, let me eject. I didn't change the payload, exact same payload, right? Back into position 1. So you guys can see the light, the LED. Oh, now I loaded the internet or the network card. It just dawned on me, that's whatever they were doing for the firmware. So if you also notice, oop, did it already finish? No.
No, you put AUG instead of AUX.
Oh, AUX, thank you. There we go. Thank you, sir. So it's still scanning. So you'll notice everything on here, or actually, is dated the date of the firmware. So because there's no clock, battery to know what time it is. So there's no history because it kind of wiped it. So, right.
So it's whatever was already there as part of the original.
Is my thought, yes. All right, so green. Put it back into army mode. All right. Oops. Loot. Now, in the script file, it had a double arrow, so it should append. Yes, I want to reload. And there we go. Your typical Microsoft ports that are open. So lots of use cases just for doing a basic nmap. All right, let's go to the next one.
You said these are only $100.
100 bucks. Lots of fun.
Yeah.
I definitely got my $100 worth.
Get me a new toy.
Uh-huh.
Just released 3 new ones too. Jump shot, can't remember what the names are, but just a something released 3.
Yep, well, they're actually at the end of here. I purchased the Wi-Fi thing that they had.
Yeah, there's the screen capture one.
Yep.
The HDMI.
Yep, Screen Crab.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Screen grab, jump shark.
They look like they're animals, huh?
Yes. All right, so we just did an nmap. Now here comes an even more advanced attack. All right. So this one has a PowerShell script and a payload. So I call this a stager. So if you think about like malware, you have your initial stage that then goes down and gets your second stage. So that's how I envision this. So this was a lot of fun realizing, like, even if I was deploying malware, how do I get the initial thing to launch? And then how do I get the additional stuff that I want? So here, we'll go through this quickly. It's starting to run a little bit late. But so one of the tools is a require tool and Impacket. So Impacket is a collection of Python scripts that help you work within networking. And the different things that are available are a Go HTTP, an Impacket, Metasploit, which is brand new for this firmware, and Responder. So Responder is a tool used for pen testers. That's a very famously used one where you set up like a fake SMB share. If you have NetBIOS turned on and NTLM, it will go, and if it sees a publicly open share, it says I need to connect to it, and it actually passes the hash to the Samba server. And if you're a malicious Samba server, you can just grab that hash and store that and then do an offline attack to brute force that. And then once you have those, and that's how a lot of pen tests get a lot of organizations, because they want availability. They want people to be able to access the file shares, so they leave all of this enabled. And then Metasploit is the Metasploit framework that just got released July 10th. Didn't even look into it, but it just is awe-inspiring to think about to plug in a computer that has direct access to your computer you're attacking with Metasploit. That just seems really, really cool.
And that's pretty small, too.
Very, yeah. Well, actually, it went too far. Let's look at this real quick if you're interested. Extensions, just so we can see. Let's look at the required tool. And it's real simple. It just says it looks onto the Bash Bunny for the tools directory, for the name of the directory. If it doesn't exist, it fails. So I am connected this way, right? So change what was it? Tools. So right now I have Impacket Responder installed. So when the shell script executes, it's going to take a look and it says, yes, require tool, Impacket. It's going to see the directory. It's going to move on. That directory could be empty, but it's assuming you followed the process, which I failed to explain. So these deb files here can be installed into the Bash Bunny in a very easy way. You can copy them to the root file system, and you can do your dpackage, install, do all that kind of fun stuff. You can also share your internet connection of the laptop you're connecting to. You can do an apt-get. You can go out and pull down the files if you really want to. But the Hak5 team made it very easy. You throw it into this tools directory, the deb file, you put it in army mode, and you boot, automatically installs. The file disappears, and then you see under the tools directory the Impacket with all the Python scripts within it. Yeah, they definitely made it very easy. All right, so it's going to create a loot directory. And again, this is on the Linux operating system. It's going to make sure that loot directory that it created is actually empty if you did it multiple times. It's going to copy, based on the switch position, because it uses the get switch position right above, that PowerShell script over to loot SMB. And we'll see why in a second. And it's also going to make a directory into your loot directory of the actual USB device. So we mounted a UDisk. So it's just going to create that directory SMB exfiltrator, which we saw is currently not there. So if we go to loot, there it is not there. All right, and this is where it actually gets fun. Now it's going to enable the Ethernet card. It's going to go ahead and load a Samba server. Now, the first time this didn't work for me, it came out, we were talking earlier, how a lot of the stuff on GitHub wasn't working. It wasn't working because I was using Windows 10. It took me a while to figure out. Someone posted, because SMB1 is disabled. Support is disabled to Windows 10. You have to manually enable it. I had to figure that out the wrong way at home.
What, 2 and 3?
Yep. So here, by enabling SMB2 support, now you have it for modern networks instead of the old archaic one. There's just a comment. It's going to create a file shared called S. And it's going to be that loot SMB that has that PowerShell that it was just copied to is now a share called S. So whatever file you put in there is just a subdirectory of S. And then it has a little log, which actually was useful in debugging this. Okay, once it spins up the Samba server, then it's going to go ahead and get the host IP, and that's going to change to the human interface device because now we need to inject some commands into the operating system. So it's going to launch its PowerShell. And I had to Google this because I am not a PowerShell guy. This is an infinite loop in PowerShell, which I guess is used very often. So it will go continuously until something inside of that loop forces it to exit. It's going to make a nonstop attempt to connection to the host. So in other words, it's trying to make a connection to the Samba server. And then when it does, it's going to connect. It's going to execute this PowerShell, and then it's going to exit. All right? Next.
So on line 32, you specified attack mode, the Ethernet, to turn that on.
Mm-hmm.
Line 43, you want to also turn on the HID. Do you have to repeat the other stuff that's already on? So for anything that's not listed, it'll just turn those off if they're already on? Does that make sense?
Correct, it does. And this goes back to, so this payload, I actually was working through, I think I mentioned to you, pulled payload down from GitHub. It wasn't working. I was debugging it, rewriting it, and I had some really weird issues. So if I set the attack mode to HID, and then I changed the attack mode to a network device, the network adapter would never load. So I don't know if that was an issue with my computer, or an issue with this firmware, or if that was something that was always the case. But I had other people describing the same type of issues I was running into. They just didn't troubleshoot to the point that I did and realize that was the case. So here, this gets enabled initially, only so it can be enabled down here again. If I only did, the original way this payload was written was attack mode hid. You only needed, there was no reason to have the Ethernet adapter spun up yet. You only wanted to do, you could do the PowerShell injection that did the infinite loop, it just sat there, and then it would fire up the network adapter and then go ahead and launch the Samba server. But the Ethernet adapter wouldn't turn on. So by reordering the order of the script, now it's working. So I don't know if it's a bug in the firmware or along those lines. Really good question. But that was just the way I got it to work, to answer your question.
So just to clarify, on line 32 you are, or are you not enabling Ethernet adapter?
I am, because it's the first time that I'm doing an attack mode, and I found, based on trial and error, that if I didn't enable the Ethernet adapter with the very first time I did the attack mode, I couldn't enable it again later. That make sense?
Yeah, it's almost like it's a definition of installation.
Yeah. So you'll see it loads it up, it'll drop it because it has another attack mode, and it'll load the network adapter again. All right, so where were we? Down here. So we have, oh yeah, so now it loads up the Ethernet adapter, it launches the PowerShell, changes the LED light to blue flashing, and now it says, while not this file in that Samba directory, it's just going to sit there and wait. So let's go take a look at the PowerShell, and well, let's do the cleanup, then we'll look at the PowerShell. So then afterwards, the files are all transferred. It cleans everything up, and then and the sync command basically ensures it's like a let's make sure everything's written to the USB drive before you unplug it, so you don't have any data corruption. All right, I moved around my payloads. All right, let's take a look at this PowerShell. Pretty simple. Now it's PowerShell, so it's pulling environment variables from your system. So it's finding my user profile and my path to my documents. So let's go look real quick. Documents. Ooh. I have Acme Corp employee data and something called that this is the loot. That looks like it's something that's going to be a lot of fun. Then you specify what type of files that you want to actually extract. It defaulted to doc files. I said, let's do everything. And then it specifies the loot directory. And then it does a simple robocopy. And then it writes that exfiltration complete. So it knows when it's done. And that's the other loop that's on the bash side. It sits there looking for this file. So when it's done copying those files, it sees that, drops down, deletes that file, syncs everything up, so I have all my files that I exfiltrated.
So it's doing individual file copy with robocopy, right?
Yep, exactly.
There's no compression or anything?
Nope. Pretty straightforward, right? All right, let's give it a try. So I actually had a... Oh. Oh. So let's get rid of the evidence that a BashBunny was plugged in.
Yeah, mobile. Do we know what MRU is?
Remove. I looked that up. It's a registry key that gets created when you plug in a USB drive.
Media removable, something like
Yes. Yeah, I think, yeah, thank you.
I used to manually do that originally.
All right, so stager, I called it stager because it's a multi-stage. Let's select all of those. Throw those into switch 1, replace. All right, and validate the loot only has my quick cred save from earlier and then the nmap scan. Eject. All right. Just so you can see a blank screen, so you can see nothing, well, you'll be able to see some of the cans get executed. So this was the scenario I was thinking with this. You walk in, you're in for an interview, you pull into whatever type of company it is, you walk in, he's like, I got an interview. I think my USB drive is broken and my dog ate my resume. Can you plug this in and see if you can access my file, and could you possibly print it or email it to me, because I'll go to Kinko's and print it. Can you go see what's on here? Appeal to that that secretary or administrative assistant or whoever it is that's greeting you that really wants to help you out. The need to help you thing, right? So let's plug this in, and this is going to be the key. Now you need to distract them, right? Because you will see things happen to the computer if that scenario is true. Or if you just had physical access, you're distracting them, you plug it in. So it's going to boot. Did it flash green? I hope it flashed green.
Are you still in arming mode?
I am in. No, I am not. Uh-oh. It's not doing anything, right? All right, switch one. There we go. And if I memorize all the different phases, I could probably speak to them. I'm going to try to. So that's the first time it launched the network adapter, right? Now it's going to do all the setup stuff behind the scenes. It's going to create the directory. It's going to do all that kind of fun stuff. And now it's going to re-enable in human interface mode and also the Ethernet. And now it's going to do the keyboard injection to launch the PowerShell. Behind the scenes, you have a Samba server that's running, blue, and then green. So supposedly, I just successfully exfiltrated some documents. Now, I demonstrated this earlier to a coworker, and he's like, yeah, but we prevent USB write on our system, so this isn't going to work here. I was like, really? I go, where did I enable a USB device? And the light bulb went off. So there is no USB device here. I spun up a computer, spun up a Samba server, and I went to a network device. So unless your computer's not allowed to write to the network, what are you going to do to stop this?
Right.
Cool?
You're gonna watch it tomorrow.
Well,
We have all these
as one of the security people here, no, not.
So,
be a meeting tomorrow.
so back in Army mode.
That'll be had to fix.
Okay, there we go.
Actually, while everyone's gone.
To the loot directory. Ooh, SMB exfiltrator. What's possibly could be in here? Ooh, that's my desktop name again, right? And there's the date and time, so we know this just happened. All right, this is the loot. Yeah, I have to start with the loot. I mean, loot's going to be good. And it's the loot.
Nice.
But employee data. I mean, employee data's got to be good, right? All employee data is good. What's in the employee data? It is employee data on on pies. I had to find a way to put.
So close. Although I actually don't mind this pie chart.
I was going to say, of a pie chart usefulness, this is probably one of the better usefulness of the pie chart.
No, it's not, because you still have to specify the numbers and the labels. So again, we're just at a table. And I can't tell the difference between like blueberry, strawberry, and other.
Oh, I can. Strawberry's the best.
Well, everybody knows that, especially with cheesecake. All I'm saying.
But again, here, we're in the BashBunny loot, so those files that were in my documents are now contained in my loot directory. And I didn't have to plug in a USB device. I don't know, it just gives me goosebumps. I just think that's really, really cool. Am I stressing you out?
Well, how are we going to set up Splunk alerts?
All right, one last one. Actually, yeah, okay, yeah, we're okay.
Yeah, I just went longer.
So the next one, and we can try this, was the quick creds. So quick creds is actually really basic. It uses a tool called Responder. Responder will emulate different services, network services, and get your computer to send information. So it says, hey, I'm a Samba server, send me your information. It says, okay, let me grab that hash. I'm a proxy server. Hey, so what's your proxy information? And the computer's like, hey, I want to be able to connect to this because this is what I normally do. So let me just send that to you, and it captures all that data. So this is where I was having some epiphanies here. So when it never worked on this computer. So let me go look. Let's look at the code first. Let's get ahead of myself. So require tool, which we just looked at. Oh, well, first, okay, responder options. I don't know what those do. I haven't played around with Responder much. This kind of did it for me. But this gives me a really good basis that if I wanted to play around with it more, I can see how easy it is. Sets the loot directory variable. It makes sure that you have Responder installed. It goes to the setup directory, throws in the Ethernet adapter, Oops, that one jumped. And then it gets your target host name and IP. That's the meat and potatoes. Now it is going to assign the target host to host. It's going to loop. It's going to make the directory. And then right here is where it's going to go ahead and put create the loot directory quick creds. And then executes the responder and all the options that were configured above. And then it's going to sit there and loop until it finds an NTLM hash, because that's the main goal. And then that's it.
It's interesting on 63 is doing it for using USB 0. Because wouldn't you be using the Ethernet in this case?
Good point. I don't know enough. I didn't dig into it to figure out why. Good question.
Yeah, and if you want to go up just a little bit.
Yep.
In your responder options.
Mm-hmm.
Right there. Yeah, I remember something around reading, writing, and the ports. I don't remember what the D might be for.
Okay.
As an F5.
Real quick, they require total Ethernet, so it does not emulate. It's still a USB device, though. Okay. So when I tried to execute that on this computer, it never, ever worked. And I believe that's because I use a local system account on this. I do not sign into Microsoft. You can see I actually only put Office on here to put my PowerPoint presentation. I didn't even register it. I'll probably uninstall it. I have OpenOffice on here, and I use that instead because, again, this is where I execute malware. It's all like this stuff, so I don't want to put anything that's personal. There's no real information on here. So when I tried to do this on this computer, because I don't sign into anything, it didn't have anything that it can offer. So then I did last night, or a couple days ago, I was making sure everything was working. I plugged it in there, which I do have my Microsoft account, and it immediately got my Microsoft account because it's constantly beaking out to Microsoft because Windows logs in with my shared account, so it's almost like an ADFS, I'm assuming. I haven't really dug into it, but it has those credentials and is able to grab them very quickly. We can plug them in. Actually, we'll try it out, and I'll show you how it doesn't work. And then what I tried to do is to plug it into that computer, but because it boots up the network card and it's on the same network, it didn't work. So I was going to demo it on here and then bring it back over, but when I tried that again, it just was a miserable failure. So if nobody got the laptop to plug in, we will just try it real quick.
And you said right at the beginning of your presentation that it found an error, the AV found an error for Mimikatz, right?
Correct, for the PowerShell that contained Mimikatz. But that was while it was downloading across the wire. If you have a system that's to do a local scan, there might be ways to get around that. Like spinning up a Samba server that was there, that then you move the file over, but AV should still catch it as soon as it touches it. But there's different things you could try to see what could get around to circumnavigate AV. That was my assumption based on what I experienced just before I started here. We could. I mean, you could have send mail server, spin it up, and.
Yeah, I wonder what that would look like, how quick that would be, if it could be done completely in the background. So that, because obviously, if it can't, someone's on it, their mail comes up, it'd be like.
Python script would do it in the background. You wouldn't even see it.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
And you can even share the.
Here, I have Python running through the Win32 comp client, and it's just whatever, like launching your Python script.
It's trying.
I'm sorry?
It's trying. The responder is saying, hey, Slack, you need to enter a username and password. Because that's one thing I do sign into was my Slack back and forth. So it is trying to get that, but it's not finding an NTLM hash. It's still yellow. It's still trying. When we look at that directory, I'm pretty sure it will be blank.
So also just pull forward services that you have on there and hope that you'll enter something in, almost like a keylogger.
Or if it's already stored in cache, you'll just send it. All right, so it's not going to work. I already know that because I let it sit there for a very, very, very long time. So let's go take a look at what pops up inside the directory, and we'll go look at some one that I grabbed earlier. The cool thing about the responder attack is everything that we've done, you've had to have physical access and you had to be signed in because you're executing commands. Nmap, you wouldn't have to. So you could do an nmap on a locked computer. Responder works with a locked computer. So even if you just have access to a building, you can walk around and you keep on sticking this into different laptops. Eventually, hopefully you find one that does work, and if they're on the domain, they will work, as I was able to do with this other laptop, and it doesn't require actually logging into the system. So taking a look here at the quick creds, it created a directory, but there's nothing there. So I did it on that computer earlier, and I won't open it. I actually have another saved one. So again, I tried this computer, didn't work earlier. First time, didn't work. I'm like, okay, what's going on? Tried it again. I'm like, okay, I did this. I know this works. Nothing changed. And then the light bulb went off. I'm connected to the Wi-Fi. Let me disconnect from the Wi-Fi. Let me try one last time, make sure I'm not crazy, and it worked. Because the responder, I'm sure responder was sending whatever data it was sending to the network card, and then it was going, and my computer was responding back across the Wi-Fi network because it had a conflict. Right, it was going back to the router. So, so I'm not going to open that file because I did not doctor that, but let's go look at here. I put in the loot directory, and this is one that I did previously, and you can see here, I tried multiple times on this computer. It did not work. And then I tried on, I had another computer I was working on, and it did work. I did.
Well, that's because you named it Snarf, right? When you throw the hackers reference.
Well, Snarf is from Thundercats.
Yeah.
Snarf, Snarf.
Well, in hackers, it's just arf, arf, arf that comes up on the screen.
Oh, okay, okay. So I love cartoons, always have, so I name a lot of things. I think the other one was that's Tweety Bird, and then I have Snarf was my other one. Our guest network.
Okay, so pretty much went to the router and it was just dropped. You're gonna get like an alert tomorrow, like, I don't know what this is. I also don't know what that is. Must have been nothing.
So the Snarf laptop that I have is connected. I have an account called Krylon, and I messed with these hashes, so you wouldn't be able to do anything with those because we are recording this. But just to show that it works. And then the other one was Tweety Bird, which is that computer, which you saw actually on the Bash Bunny. And again, that does work as well. So there is my Outlook. That is not the real hash. Pretty cool, though. If you had the full hash, you could easily crack those offline, depending on the complexity of the password. And then I won't actually go through it, but another one, time zone prank. Very, very, very straightforward. Human interface device. Just run the command. And then I changed your time. So this is a fun one. If you just want to go around plugging the people who forgot to lock their desktop and change them to different time zones, you change your screen upside down. I mean, you have the access to PowerShell. You could have a lot of fun with an unlocked computer just to play around, right?
Time zone would be awesome because then all of your meetings end up popping off late.
You change it by an hour.
Yeah.
Just they won't notice. I'm like, oh, it's almost time to go.
Yep.
All right, so let's finish through here. Any questions on any of the payloads?
No, but that is why all corporations have behavioral analytics.
So I was going to go either or. This was my backup of actually going over the attacks. Quick creds. All right, detection mitigation. You asked about this before. So every USB device has a vendor ID and a product ID. They outline all of them in their wiki of what different modes give you different the vendor IDs and process IDs. When you specify attack mode and you put in storage or HID or Ethernet, they have a command called vid _ and you can specify the vid you want it to show up as. So I did plug this in the simple arming mode into one of our laptops to see if one of our endpoint detection tools caught it, and it caught it immediately because it caught the 0xF000. So the EDR tool that we have has that explicitly covered in its detection. So I was like, that's really cool. I have not done the change and plugged it in to see if it truly emulates and gets rid of all of these codes that the tool would detect.
So like, because you plugged it in, and it was like, oh, USB, and they clicked on
The directory structure.
all your stuff there, and they're like, wait a minute. So I'm assuming there's probably a way to hide that too. Or
Well, if you're worried about, then you'd use attacks, you didn't use the USB. You know, you spin up a Samba server, you spin up FTP server, you spin up, the one thing I was thinking about, serial. So you can enable the serial port and transfer files through a serial port. Do you know, I don't know of any EDR tool right now that, there probably is a way, you would see it inside the registry, but that's not an exfiltration way that I think anybody's thinking about.
slow,
If you got time and you're local, I mean, so just thinking of the different options, you know, infinite possibilities. All right, other cool things. So I just wanted to share other Hak5 tools. I've always been a fan of Hak5, from their Wi-Fi Pineapple to the Rubber Ducky to the Land Shark, or which I haven't even used yet. Forgot. Yeah, it's Land Shark. But they also have the Shark Jack, which is kind of like a Bash Bunny, but for network. So it has a USB on the one side that you plug in, that you program, and then you plug it into Ethernet. So you can do an Nmap scan, you can set up a Samba server, you can do you can use responder, plug it in, open jack, let responder do its thing, see how many computers actually it's able to enumerate, put it back in your pocket. The other one is a Signal Owl, and that's the one that I went ahead and purchased. Signal Owl is a low-power Wi-Fi attack platform. So it has Kismet, Aircrack NG, a lot of built-in tools. I haven't received it yet. Hopefully I'll get it soon. But the idea is you plug it into a USB port and you let it sit. And it's just going to monitor your Wi-Fi. And it's going to do Wi-Fi attacks to capture the file hash. And then you come back, you take it, and then you do offline attacks to those file hashes. Yes. NAC control without Screen Crab was the one that was mentioned earlier. That is a very expensive tool, $200, but it's basically a pass-through HDMI device, the same thing that we use for streaming. This was $150, so it makes sense. This is probably $200. You can also connect it through Wi-Fi, and you can configure it to be continuously, like a video, or to grab every so many seconds, and it will store to its local storage that you can then grab later. Or through a Wi-Fi connection, you can actually go back to down here, which is a brand new thing I didn't know that Hak5 had offered, is their Cloud C2. So it's free. There's also a paid-for version. And essentially, they've come up with a cloud platform that you can connect all your tools to. So you, instead of throwing it into the loot directory, you can throw it up, find a way to exfiltrate it up to the cloud. For a lot of the different tools, you can actually send commands back down to have it do different things. So if you have a Pineapple somewhere, you can actually launch different attacks from the cloud once it's connected. Right. Same thing with the Screen Crab. So if you're able to get access to Wi-Fi, take your screen captures and throw them back up. So we're talking about Hasenpfeffer this whole time. So does everyone know what Hasenpfeffer is? It's rabbit stew. It's rabbit stew. Hasenpfeffer is a traditional German stew made from marinated rabbit or hare cut into stew and meat-sized pieces and braised with onions and marinade made from wine and vinegar. Never had it. It's supposed to be pretty good. Is there any questions?
no, you answered all mine.
This isn't exactly a question, but that was dope.
What, this slide or?
No.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And then that's all I got.
Nice.
Thank you, guys.